What's going on, guys? It's Jimmy here. So, China has released some long awaited published data here. So, you can see here on the COVID origins, Chinese scientists publish long awaited data here. Here's the details on this of what they've finally released here with a little bit of skepticism here. Coming from the Hunan seafood market, which has been linked to the first cases of the virus. Okay. A research team in China has published analysis of the samples taken more than 3 years ago from the market linked to the outbreak of C19. The Hunan seafood and wildlife market has been a focal point in the search for the origin of the virus. But this is the first peer-reviewed study of biological evidence gathered from the market back in 2020. Now, it's taken them 3 years for them to come out with this data. By linking the virus with animals sold in the market, it could open new lines of inquiry into how the outbreak began. The research reveals swabs that tested positive for the virus also contained genetic material from wild animals. Some scientists say this is further evidence that the disease was initially transmitted from an infected animal to a human. But others have urged caution in interpreting the findings, and it remains unclear why it took them 3 years for the genetic content of the samples to be made public. You know, China, right? Another theory has centered on the suggestion that the virus accidentally leaked from a laboratory in Wuhan, which of course is a definite possibility. No definitive proof. The Chinese research team posted an early version of their study online back in February of 2020, but they did not publish the full genetic information that was contained in the samples gathered from the market. In March of this year, another international group of research shared their own assessment of what those crucial market swabs revealed. We actually covered that here on our show. After spotting that genetic sequences had been posted on a scientific data sharing website. This new analysis, which has been validated by other scientists before being published in the journal Nature, includes more important details about the content of those samples, which were collected from stalls, surfaces, cages, and machinery inside the market. Remember the raccoon dogs? Yeah, pretty unbelievable stuff that kind of goes on there in that market, right? Before the 2020 outbreak, scientists took photos of animals, including raccoon dogs, being sold in the Hunan market. Their analysis also showed that animals now known to be susceptible to the virus, particularly raccoon dogs, were being sold alive in those locations. But Chinese researchers have pointed out that their discoveries fall short of definitive proof of how the outbreak started, saying, quote, "These environmental samples cannot prove that the animals were infected," their paper explains. The possibility remains that the virus was brought into the market by an infected person rather than an animal. Professor David Robertson from the University of Glasgow is a virologist who has been involved in the genetic investigation into the origins, told BBC News the most important thing is that this is very important data set is now published and available for others to work on. He added that the contents of the samples were compelling evidence that animals there were probably infected with the virus. It's the whole body of evidence that's important. And when you bring this together with the fact that early C19 cases in Wuhan were linked to the market, it's strong evidence that this is where a spillover from an animal in the market occurred. So you guys can let me know your thoughts here on this. A little bit of skepticism on my part because they took so long to release this data. So who knows what tampering or they're not releasing with it. So you guys let me know your thoughts here in the comments. Next up, I wanted to go over an interesting story here with you as well, as the Biden administration is proposing a rule for transgender student athletes that allows for some restrictions but opposes categorical bans. And this is obviously a new issue here in the last several years, and it kind of goes over what do we do here for athletes and even in school systems and here in the US or even in the Olympics and sports systems, because particularly, and I'll show you this case that just happened up here with a bodybuilder. I'll show you this here in a second, because what do you do, especially when um, a man, converts to a woman in sports and then just goes and dominates the sport and, says that he's a woman. I'll show you this case that literally just happened here. It's kind of blow your mind. Is it fair to the women? Because, this guy was born a man. Is it fair? And how do you come up with rules here? When obviously there are some, uh, you know, legitimate people that are, you know, converting. I don't even know is that the politically correct way to say this here? Um, but how do you make it fair for the women? And it's not really so much the other way around, like women converting to men, right? Because it's really more so the men converting to women, and because men are just really stronger, genetically, right? Look at this case here. This is kind of the perfect scenario here in Canada. A male power lifter participates in a women's competition to mock a new trans inclusive policy and smashes the women's record that was previously held by a trans woman. And here's the guy who basically isn't a trans woman, but he competed in the women's category and basically just said, "Oh yeah, I identify as a woman." And clearly, you see this guy here. He's a monster bodybuilder, right? And he just basically said, "Oh, well, yeah, I identify as a woman." And this is kind of the problem with this whole idea, right? How how, how do you even challenge that, right? If somebody says that this guy identifies as a woman, what do you even say to that, right? I mean, if he says that, I mean, what do you how do you I mean, it's just like this is such a strange thing to even talk about. But so he went and they allowed it because it says here the trans inclusion policy of Canadian Powerlifting Union was officially released in February, and it essentially stated that if a man says he is a woman, he, in parentheses with a S in front of the she, can compete with biological women, no questions asked, no medical transition required. And this guy went on to smash the women's record held by any previous women or the woman who had converted to a man or was a trans woman previously. And he did this just to mock the policy, which I can totally understand his point of view, saying that this policy is a little ridiculous in a sense because any man can go and just say, I identify as a woman, and then break any record. And we've seen this previously with the swimmer. Remember the swimmer? Yeah, it was the trans swimmer Leah Thomas speaks out on the controversy. And this was a guy swimmer who had previously not really been. He was an okay. He was a kind of decent swimmer, and he converted to being a woman. And as soon as she did that, um, they went on to win every single smash, every single women's record. But when they were a man, they weren't winning every single men's record. But as soon as they converted over, they were instantly winning every single women's record. So you can see kind of the problem here with this. Where do we draw the line? What is allowed? What is not allowed? And how do we make this going forward? You know, I mean, in my opinion, there's really only one of two ways to really make it fair is to one, you have to compete in the category you were born. So if you were born as a man, you have to compete as a man. If you're born as a woman, you have to compete as a woman. It's the only genetically fair way to do it. Or two, you can create a trans category where you can do that. The problem is that I just don't know if there will be enough people to have categories like that. Maybe on a large scale, maybe, but on a local scale, probably not. Um, can let me know your thoughts here on this. And I get that there's going to be some people who may or may not like this. There's always going to be some people with an opinion who are not going to like this or are going to be okay with this. But the problem is how do you make this fair? And again, you look at this bodybuilder uh, example. This will happen more and more frequently because if a man can just say he's a woman and go compete there and do it to mock the policy, this is going to happen more and more frequently. Um, and honestly, I think this will happen more and more frequently. You can let me know your thoughts here in the comments, but if this is the policies that are allowed to happen, what's going to stop people from doing this? There's going to be men that do this as a joke and do this to make fun of the system, do this to prove a point to the system. And the people that are going to get hurt are the women athletes that are going there and trying to prove their all and are literally, I mean, I was an athlete for years. I mean, I literally have my wrestling, one of my top wrestling medals there for taking second in the state of Ohio out of tens of thousands of wrestlers, right? Okay, I was ranked nationally in the whole country. So for to have that taken away from you if you're a woman athlete or a man athlete, whatever, because of a rule like this and somebody, switching, it's just like you shouldn't have that taken away from you, right? You can let me know your thoughts here in the comments, but it's just I mean, 20 years ago when I was a wrestler, you didn't have this. In fact, there was a few women wrestlers back then, and there's women wrestling today still. But now, I mean, now there's a women's wrestling category today. Back then, there wasn't. That you'd have a few women wrestlers, but they would have to wrestle against the men. But now you actually have women's wrestling. It was in the Olympics. If you watch the Olympics, you actually see women's wrestling, which is amazing. But this is definitely an issue nowadays. You can let me know your thoughts on how you think it should be in the comments. I'll keep you up to date here with everything going on here in our country on a daily basis. If you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe down below. Click the bell icon so you don't miss out on new videos. I'll keep you up to date here. Thanks for liking and sharing these videos. Here's some videos you should watch next. You won't believe what Russia just did. You can click on this video here to see that. Or the US government banning some of your items, which is unbelievable. So click on one of those videos next. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next video. And make sure to have a happy Easter weekend.